Good evening and welcome back to Prime of Midlife. It's Wednesday evening, and this evening we are talking shortages and planning. And the reason I'm talking about shortages is the lack of information that I'm seeing at the moment. At the end of February, there was a whole lot of media attention on the fact that there was food shortages in the UK, and that there was a bit of a problem with eggs, tomatoes, cucumbers, etc., peppers. They were getting rationed in the shops. And when I checked on the computer tonight to just go, do you know what update is there? And there's been nothing since then. There's no, originally, I think at the end of February, the government were saying, oh, it's only going to be for a couple of weeks. Is that not a couple of weeks now? What's happening? Because when I first started prepping a year ago, I distinctly remember reading that farmers with greenhouses couldn't afford to keep the energy on to plant the whole lot of the greenhouses, so they were looking at cutting their planting. As I said last week, there's farmers who are supposed to be planting just now who are not planting as much. But we knew all this last year with the price of fertiliser, the price of diesel. We knew farmers couldn't afford to grow as much as before because they weren't making the money, especially if they sold to supermarkets. I mean, you imagine being a farmer and you're making like a penny per loaf of bread. That's not worth it. Do you know the price of milk, the price of eggs, the price of anything just now? Because of the way the contracts are done with the supermarkets, and farmers are tied in for an awful lot longer than they are in most other places. And we knew this was coming last year, and nothing's been done. And it absolutely happened 2 weeks ago, end of February. It was all over the news, rationing on salad items in the shops. And since then, radio silence. There's been nothing. And the budget is due on the 15th. And almost around the same time, I can't remember if it's the 13th or the 18th of March, is when the agreement between Russia and Ukraine and Turkey, etc., for transporting food, fertiliser, etc., from that region, from Russia and Ukraine, that's when that's up for renewal. And the chief of the United Nations, is it Guterres, he was over in Ukraine to see what was happening, because no one's quite sure whether Russia's going to continue with that agreement, because seemingly they're irked that the sanctions mean they can't sell as much as they thought they would. So if that agreement doesn't continue, that means that there will be a whole lot of food, fertiliser, etc., not coming out of that area. And that is millions of tonnes. And that is, for a lot of people in certain areas, that's the difference between eating and not eating. So there's a whole lot of thought that needs to go into where food's coming from for us for the next while. I know that when I was looking this up, I looked up, for food shortages 2023. And I mean, the last main articles on a Google search are from the end of February. But there's also a few articles with the EU food shortages not a problem because the EU are pulling together. And of course, the UK is now an outlier, as some people saw when they were saying about shortages in the UK and people in Europe were showing us photographs of how many tomatoes were in the shops, etc. And I'm now looking to think, well, this is not actually, like the government said, going away in 2 weeks. It'll be a short-lived thing. It's not a short-lived thing. The farmers haven't planted the plants. They can't afford to grow them in the greenhouses. They can't afford to grow them in the fields. The cost of diesel, the cost of fertiliser, the cost of everything has gone up so much. They haven't planted as much. There's not as much food going to be available this year as there was last year. And that's going to be a huge thing. And I am really quite concerned that there is nothing I can find in the mainstream media about that. I even went onto the government announcements webpage and there's nothing there either. There seems to be nothing to acknowledge that this could be a huge problem. And again, I sound like I'm scaremongering. I don't mean to be. But, you know, I've started my spring onions. I intend planting more things at the weekend. Because if the cost of fresh fruit and veg is going to go up so much, or if there's going to be so many shortages, do you know, even if I manage to grow half of what I try, it's still better than nothing. So I am definitely looking at that. I am going to be pulling out the pressure canner at the weekend because I need to, I'm having a thing. The fact that no one seems to be talking about this, it was just it'll last for a couple of weeks. I don't think so. And I'd rather be prepared just in case. So that is my thought for this evening. I am going, as usual, to have more tea, and I will catch you later.